UKIP Mark Reckless.
The Scottish First Minister has said that her government is now to seek a second independence referendum. One of the challenges she will face is that, on a standalone basis, Scotland is running a deficit of some 9 or 10% of GDP, compared to 4% for the UK as a whole. It's estimated, therefore, that independent Scotland would have to fill a fiscal hole of some 15 to 16 billion. Has the Cabinet Secretary made any estimate of the equivalent figure for Wales?
Of that sort available for Wales, of course, but matters for Scotland shall either matter for the Scottish Parliament and then for the Scottish people to weigh up and come to a decision.
The Welsh Governance Centre has helpfully recently published a report where it sets out total Welsh public sector spending by all levels of government. In the most recent year, 2014-15, for which they have comparable data, was £38 billion. That compares with total public sector revenues drawn from Wales of £23.3 billion. So the report finds that Wales's net fiscal balance was a deficit of £14.7 billion, almost the same as Scotland, despite a significantly smaller economy, which would lead a fiscal gap of 24% of GDP. Given that gap and Wales's dependence on fiscal transfers from England, is it sensible for the First Minister to say that Scotland should be the model for Wales?
Well, I'm sure the First Minister was right to point to the fact that there are many ways in which Scotland can be a model for Wales, just as there are many things that we do here that Scotland regards as a model that they can learn from as well. So there are no points to be made of a sensible nature from that remark. What there is, as the member says, and from this government's point of view, we are a devolutionist government that believes in being part of the United Kingdom. And the reason we believe in being part of the United Kingdom is that we regard it as an insurance policy in which we pool our risks and we share rewards. I don't believe the questions that appear to pit one part of the United Kingdom against another and to say that one party is being subsidised by another. I don't think that's a helpful way of thinking about things. The member will be aware that the same report from the Wales Governance Centre says that Wales makes a greater fiscal effort per head of the population than any other part of the United Kingdom. We all make contributions. We all have needs that we are able to address. And I think that is the most sensible way of trying to think about these matters.
So £7,500 approximately per head is raised in tax in Wales compared to £10,000 across the UK as a whole. And I'm glad to hear the Cabinet Secretary's restatement and clarification that his party, at least in the government he leads, is a devolutionist one. Because in many of the actions of this government, agreement is sought with a certain party opposite, and I'm never quite clear whether they're in opposition or supporting the government. But their signature policy of independence for Wales is supported by a mere 6% of people living in Wales. Now, the Cabinet Secretary spoke earlier about a quadrilateral meeting, and the First Minister has put great emphasis on the JMC sort of structure. But are we not in a very different situation? Not only did Wales, as England, vote for leaving the European Union and do so by more than the UK as a whole. The situation we face is that Northern Ireland has no government, and it's not clear when they will have a government, while the Scottish Government will, for the foreseeable future, be agitating for independence, seeking pretexts for dispute, rather than trying to make the UK work. In that situation, should the Welsh Government not put a greater emphasis on bilateral meetings and negotiation with the UK Government to get the best result for Wales, as the Cabinet Secretary sought to do with the fiscal framework?
Well, bilateral contacts with the UK Government are important. On the Brexit front, I met with the Secretary of State for leaving the European Union the week before last, and the First Minister met bilaterally with him last week. But these things are not, in the end, a substitute for the JMC process and indeed for a better, improved and substantially stepped up JMC process. The Scottish Minister for Leaving the European Union said very explicitly to me that despite the fact that they have a political set of ambitions that they hope to take forward in the way that the First Minister of Scotland has set out, that Scotland intended to continue to be members of the JMC, participating members of the JMC, and coming together in that way, where the four component parts of the United Kingdom share ideas, attempt to find common solutions to common problems, I think, is not to be sidelined by bilateral contacts. Bilateral contacts supplement them and are important, but they are not a substitute for them.
Question 3.
Question